Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And following up a little on our last episode, we touched a little bit on the idea of your analog backlog versus your digital backlog, because it is kind of hard to keep track of games when all you have of it is a big list of it versus a big pile of games. And we wanted to talk a little more about kind of how digital gaming or how the digital marketplace has sort of shifted certainly how we play games, and maybe for you as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, and I think I mentioned it in the last episode as well, but as someone who still collects CDs, still has Blu-rays and DVDs, like, I fought hard against the digital marketplace, mostly because I liked having the physical media. I liked the sensation of unwrapping a brand new game that was covered in plastic, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like an endorphin rush for me, and I'm sure many other people. But also, like, you know, with the PS4, I had a bad experience with the digital library because you have to download both the disc games and the digital games. So it's like, what's the point of buying the discs on that system? And the hard drives on the factory PS4s are pretty small. So, you know, and also as a collector, like, you want the thing. Like, we talked
Always.
a little bit about we talked a little bit about how, you know, with Groovy, the new app that me and Geoff have been using, that is like Goodreads, where you can have an online library of what you've always ever played, which is nice, but it's still not quite the same as like going to Geoff's home, which I've done a few times, and just seeing shelves and shelves of games of all kind. I mean, if you look on the photos page of the Facebook page, we have some of those libraries photographed, but it literally like just games upon games, and it just looks awesome as someone who's into gaming.
Oh, yeah, there is something very satisfying. It's one thing to look at a counter on a screen and see like this number of this, and it's another thing to like really see how much shelf space it takes up. Both good and bad in its own way. And I find that buying games in physical copies is a nice deterrent for me, because I plan on upgrading my shelving system very soon. But at the moment, any new game I buy pretty much has to go on a pile on top of the shelves that I already have. So there's always that problem to deal with.
Well, right. And like talking about physical medium, first of all, of course, it's a space thing. Like talking about earlier how I collect CDs and I'm a big music nerd. And you can find out more about that on my other podcast, Autographs. You know, I've interviewed musicians and I've talked a lot about music. And like, I just like having the physical medium. But the reality is, me and my wife have no space for CDs. So recently I did the purge of taking a bunch of them out of the boxes, keeping the booklets and the CDs and throwing the rest away, recycling it, and then putting them all in books, because in books or sleeves, they take up a lot less space. And that's the first major problem with physical media now, I think, is that there's just so much media. Like, think about when we were growing up. We talked a little bit about this with our backlogs, too. You know, you bought less games. There were less games. The development cycles were lower. There were, you know, less companies making games. And so, like, having, you know, even if you had every single Nintendo game when you were a kid, it still maybe took up a bookshelf, like a whole bookshelf, because there just were a limited amount of people working on them and games available in the States. But now, you know, with three major consoles, still games being made for older consoles, and, you know, being able to buy older consoles and their games as well as the newer stuff. Like, as we create more stuff, just trying to keep up with that physical space is impossible. You know, I have this vision of someday maybe having a basement library, but instead of books, it's just all games.
Ooh, yeah, that's the dream.
Which would be cool. But like, you know, it's just managing the actual physical space can be a pain in the ass. I mean, even consoles themselves take up a lot of space. And like, you only have so much room on your entertainment system or in your shelving to put all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, granted, each individual system, if they had any modicum of success, they do have a fairly large library.
Yeah.
You know, in the several hundreds. And I think it was also a lot easier when we were younger, and not simply because we were younger, but because gaming was younger. It was a little harder to end up with too much shovelware. I mean, there certainly was an amount,
Yeah.
but KB Toys would only carry so many Nintendo games, and there was a lot of rentals that went on, and and what have you. So yeah, it was a lot easier to keep your cartridges in like whatever specialized shelving thing you had. I remember I had this. I had these two different storage things that were specifically for Nintendo games. I had like little notches and slots for it. One of them was sort of like a big, I want to say it was probably about the size of a microwave, like a small microwave, and like a big drawer you'd pull out, and it had two rows that you could put the NES cartridges in without sleeves or anything else, and they kind of were like a little card catalog. And the other was like a little lock box about the size of a shoebox. And that was more or less all I needed. And yeah, now actually my NES collection isn't that huge.
No, I've seen
But
some huge ones. I mean, yours is
oh yeah.
sizable, but yeah, no. I
My,
mean, there are also so many games that we didn't know existed when we were kids that now you can find if you have the
truth.
cash.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's so much easier to, and especially if you find the right deal somewhere, you go like, "Oh man, I remember hearing about this game. Oh, it's $7. I got that much on me right now. Yeah, sure, why not?"
Right.
And yeah, oh yeah, and no, certainly my collection is more the breadth of systems right now than depth in any one, except maybe the PS1. I counted. I've got over 100 games for that right now.
Nice.
Yeah, that's my pride and joy. But and we all have that. But yeah, I mean, CDs have been around for a couple decades, and the format for them hasn't necessarily changed a great deal. Little bits and pieces about them. We don't really have enhanced CDs anymore that you put into your PC to like see additional files.
I remember that. Like,
Oh yeah.
different bands would have like band photos and music videos, but you can only see it on your PC. Yeah,
Oh
wow, I
yeah.
forgot about those.
Or like the early Daft Punk CDs that would take you to their website.
Uh-huh.
Like all of the Gorillaz' first two albums.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and those are like just skimming the surface, but those still play in CD players the same way current CDs do and
Mm-hmm.
early CDs do. And while some people don't necessarily collect as much for CDs anymore, a lot of people that I know go either digital or vinyl. And
Right.
CDs have kind of fallen by the wayside, but there's still audio CDs that play in many different kinds of CD players. The only reason I still have CDs is my car is over 10 years old, and it was made in the year after they phased out the tape deck, but before they brought in the aux jack. So all I've got is a CD player. Um,
Bummer.
so, hey, on the plus side, I could still make my wife mix CDs.
That's true. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've kind of moved on to doing that on Spotify and making mix playlists instead.
which is a true delight.
It is.
But
Well, it's funny though because you were talking about CDs. Like gaming more mimics, I think, the video medium than the audio medium because there have been less leaps in audio than video, which we went from VHS to DVD to Blu-ray in a much shorter period of time, and gaming pretty much every generation more or less the disc, even if their discs have changed, and for sure, like we started with cartridges, and some things still use variations of cartridges.
proprietary stuff. I mean, we've more or less evolved to SD cards,
Yeah,
but even still, it's all proprietary, which can be both good and bad, and of course happens for all sorts of reasons. In much the same way that the film industry and the music industry have had to deal with piracy
yeah.
or anything like that. But I mean, you want to talk about over proprietary. Ask any Vita owner how much they enjoy the memory card situation. And oh my God.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's nice that at least like with the Switch, there it is, first reference. That they use micro SD cards, and so they're pretty universal. I think they have a storage limit, like you can't use over 128.
Okay.
But besides that, you can use any micro SD card you want, which is super useful. Whereas older systems, like think about the PS2 and the original Xbox
Mm-hmm.
and the GameCube, and all of them having proprietary memory cards that were only for those systems. That, like, it's funny. I have two GameCube memory cards but I don't have a GameCube or a Wii anymore, and I can't get any of my friends who have a GameCube or a Wii to take them because they already have a bunch of memory cards, and you can't sell them online because they don't sell for anything. It's like, it's just really funny. They'll have this thing that's useful, but only for a very specific thing, and no one needs it.
I would probably take that off your hands, dude. I
I
kind
will
of
give
really
them to
like
you.
collecting memory cards. I have
They are all yours then.
awesome. I think I have like 17 PS1 memory cards, 3 PS2 memory cards, and like 5 or 6 GameCube memory cards. The only system where I really need that much storage space is the PS1 because those
Yeah.
things were only 15 blocks each. And I have Diablo and RPG Maker, so I need the space. And I also really enjoy with those being able to buy a used one, fire it up, and see what files are on it.
Yeah, see if people cleared it out or not.
Oh, yeah, most of the time they haven't. And I mean, it's one thing to buy an old game that had internal saving and like, oh, there's somebody else's file. That's cool. But it's a whole nother thing to get like a PS1 memory card, which you usually can get for anywhere between $5 and $10 at any used video game store that's getting rid of them. I found a few at thrift shops, and you pop it in, and it's like, all right, you're not only seeing like a game like one playthrough, you are seeing a piece of somebody's collection.
Yeah,
Um,
a part of their
I
gaming history.
yeah, I got one memory card that had both English and Japanese save files, and I was like, I want to know this person. I want to see like what the hell their collection was, or
Interesting.
somebody else where it was like, oh my god, it was the most stereotypical thing. It had Medal of Honor, Call of Duty, and Madden on it. I was just like, and it's just like, wow, what a freaking cross section.
Right.
And so, to my detriment, some of these I haven't erased because I really enjoy them as artifacts. And so, I'm building up my video equipment, and I kind of want to like do a little video about some of these things before I clear them out. But
Well, yeah, you could do it kind of like what is it, like a wildlife series, like,
oh yeah,
like we talk about the different memory cards, like different species. That could be a lot of fun.
oh god, yeah, it'd be so much fun. But yeah, I mean, like, and you're right. The film industry has gone through a lot more format changes, and this is another reason why collections and physical collections can be so difficult and debilitating, because you not only need the medium, but you need the thing to play it on. And while it doesn't feel like such a big deal when like old classic rock albums or whatever else got re-released to CDs or get a digital download or something like that, or old films, you can get a Blu-ray release of, I don't know, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and even though you could have gotten it on the DVD or the clamshell VHS or maybe even Betamax, I don't know. It feels less, I don't know, intrusive than rebuying it when it's re-released on another console. And I know we've talked about re-releases in the past, and I think maybe because people rarely have so much brand identity with like Blu-ray than they might have with a PS4.
Well, I think also part of it is the amount of time. If you think about a 40-hour game versus an hour and a half to 2-hour movie,
True.
like rebuying something you'll be able to watch way more times, but also it's just simply price point, I think. Like Blu-rays, while can be expensive, are still never going to be as expensive as a video game. And so reinvesting that cost, I mean, we also have been. So let's talk about some negatives about physical media. First of all, GameStop, and not just GameStop now, it's Best Buy and every other trade-in company has kind of beaten down our wills of game value. And what I mean by that is like, everyone is on their high horse when they buy a brand new game. This game is $60, the trade-in value is only $30, I'm never going to trade it in. But as your library gets bigger and you run out of space, you start to rethink that, especially when they give you deals on trading in multiple things, because even though you're kind of getting price gouged a little bit, you just want to get the store credit to buy another thing. And once you don't have the space for it, it becomes less of a concern. Also, something about physical media that I think, obviously we don't really have to worry about with digital media is I feel like kids now don't really know the meaning of waiting for release. And what I mean by that is I remember the first console I remember waiting to get was the N64. It was a gift. It was going to be a gift from my parents for my bar mitzvah. bar mitzvah. Sorry, I have a tendency of blending that word together. My wife would yell at me. And I was so excited, but it was sold out everywhere, and I had it pre-ordered. And I remember having it pre-ordered, waiting and waiting, and I still hadn't gotten a call from Toys R Us that it was in. So on a whim, I had my dad take me to the Toys R Us near us to go see if they had them in stock. And this guy, the guy behind the counter at the separate gaming area, said, "Oh yeah, we have one here. I don't know, might be for reserve, but I don't know. You can have it." And then gave it to us, and we bought it.
Well,
and
yes.
then I got Mario 64, and I was so happy. And that high of waiting for something and then getting it on release, waiting in line for games, midnight launches, all of that stuff with digital media doesn't exist. And while it's sad that some of that hype goes, it's also really awesome that besides needing to get the actual hardware, which can still be a problem, a la the Switch, and it took me months to get mine.
Oh, yeah.
The games, there's no more waiting for games or games selling out. I remember waiting for, I think it was a Kirby game for the 3DS that I was really excited for. And it came out, and I didn't pre-order it, and I went to the GameStop, and they didn't have it. And I was so upset. And then I got home, and I was like, oh, wait, the 3DS has a lot of storage. Oh, I can just download it. I guess I'll just buy it. And that was the first time my mind switched, where I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll just buy it digitally. And again, when you run out of storage space, that's a problem. But like I said in the last episode, I don't mind building up my Switch library digitally because A, the Switch is so perfectly portable, but B, because the games don't actually take up that much space, and a lot of your saves automatically go to the cloud. So it's literally just the game files that are on your system. And I think that's kind of freeing to be able to do that. I care about it less on the PS4 because I'm not taking my PS4 anywhere. But it's one of those things that it's I want to praise the digital market because I'm excited to not have that barrier of not being able to get it. But just the same, I think there's a little bit less of the hype. There's anticipation for the game coming out, I think, when there's a large distance. But then once it comes out, it's like, oh, yeah, I got it. It's digital. I have it.
Yeah, there's a lot. And I mean, the abundance of day one editions and pre-order bonuses certainly lead into that. And that is a topic for another episode. And
yeah, I'm kind of glad that I got past the pre-order bonus BS because I used to live for that stuff. But I think part of it now is a lot of PC games, at least. I know Blizzard does this. If you pre-order the game, you get a few cosmetic things, but you're just getting the game. Or with Destiny 2, there was a day one edition that came with the first two expansions where you paid $100 and you got the game and the first two expansions included. Whereas if you bought the game in the season pass, it would be a lot more money. And so that kind of made sense. But yeah, no, I'm not going to go off on a tangent on pre-order bonuses because that's a whole separate episode.
Yeah, but interestingly, I kind of disagree with you as far as digital for handheld goes. I know this is a personal opinion. This is neither one of these are objectively better. I really, and much like what we were talking about with dealing with our backlogs last episode,
right?
I really prefer having a physical copy for a game for my handheld systems because I am so utterly distractible. I will just switch between apps and just switch and switch and switch and switch. And that's not a reference to the system. I'm just going to change over to this game and then change over to this game and spend 5 minutes with this game and then spend 5 minutes with that one. I mean, sticking to just the cartridge in my 3DS and Pokemon Shuffle, I still get very distracted. And so I'm able to better concentrate on whatever game I'm playing, and especially if it's a longer game or if it's one that requires some hours and time. A little bit of follow-up from last episode. I pulled out my Game Boy Color because I was about to leave for work or something, and I realized my 3DS, I didn't charge it last night. It was almost dead, so I plugged it in. So I'm like, all right, let me grab my Game Boy Color because that is my go-to for retro handheld. I love my Game Boy Color so very much. And I was like, yeah, let me grab a game, maybe two, put them in my jacket pocket. And I realized I had my copy of Link's Awakening in there. And I'd recently rebought that because it was the Game Boy Color version. And in combining our collections and everything, my wife and I realized we didn't actually have Link's Awakening. So we had gotten it at our local GameStop, which sells retro games now. So thank you very much. And no, and no, in playing through that, I'd gotten to Eagle's Tower, level 7, and for whatever reason, I was just getting frustrated trying to deal with the main puzzle in that, and ended up getting distracted, playing something else, going away, and then coming back, and the cartridge was still in the Game Boy Color. Like, I'd gone back to playing my 3DS, and I was just like, all right, let's do this. And managed to, over the next day or so, like, with subway rides, finish the game. And I feel very good and very accomplished. And that was the game I beat. And for my beat a game a week thing. And I don't think that would have happened if it was like, turn on the Game Boy Color and there's a memory pack in there and here's all of your Game Boy games. Pick one. Like choice fatigue.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And I think for me, the reason I think it's a little different for the Switch is just because it's so perfectly mobile and the multiplayer is easy to do that I'm more excited to have all of my multiplayer games on it saved to the system.
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, I've only bought a few full release titles so far digitally. For the most part, it's been the indie games or like the digital only games like your Ukuleles, Shovel Knight, and so on that had minimal physical release or none.
Yeah, and that is a really good thing about the digital revolution, let's say. Like,
Yeah.
I have my personal feelings on, like, if I can, I would rather have the physical thing, but yeah, being able to release digitally has made it possible for a lot of smaller studios to have widespread release because they don't have to worry about distribution costs.
Yeah, no, I think the indie revolution wouldn't have been possible on any of the gaming consoles if it weren't for the digital marketplace. I mean, Steam and, also the really great thing about the Nintendo Switch is they have had like a resurgence of indie titles, either games that have just come out or games that have been out for the PC or other consoles that are now going to the Switch because it's super cheap to port it.
Yeah, and
you don't
it's
have to
an
do
experience. Yeah, and it's an experience you can't get elsewhere. Like, I don't know about you, Matt, but I am certainly every time they're like, it's coming to the Switch. Oh yes, now I can take it everywhere.
Right, exactly. And like, I don't think I'll ever rebuy games for the Switch to make them portable. Although
True.
I say that now, and I probably still will do it.
There'll be a few exceptions. There's always a few exceptions.
But the thing that I will praise the digital versus analog, the digital side of it is this freedom to kind of just buy. And let's talk about Steam again, because I think Steam is one of the leaders in digital gaming.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that I can get games I've never played and just have it on my computer, so when I'm ready to sit down and play it, it's there, or I can get it and I'm excited and I start playing it right away, is really nice. And then platform becomes irrelevant. There will always be first-party games. Like, it's very rare that we will very unlikely rather, that we'll ever see a Zelda or a Metroid or something on the PC, which is fine.
Yeah.
Or who knows, because Nintendo has been broadening that spectrum. But be that as it may, games that have started out exclusives that eventually become wide release come to the PC, and it's really great. Like Resident Evil 4, which I had talked about recently, I'd always heard good things about, but I wasn't a huge survival horror fan, but I have gotten more into third and first person shooters.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I should finally try this game. And the fact that it was praised on the GameCube, re-released on the Wii, re-released on the PS2, like, it was released everywhere, and then on the Xbox Live and all of this stuff.
Oh yeah.
If it wasn't available readily digitally, I don't know that I would have ever played it, because I passed it up when it was physical. And then, I don't have a GameCube anymore. I have a PS2, but I don't play it as much as I'd like. So, if it wasn't redistributed digitally, I may have never played it. Same for, like, I just got Beyond Good and Evil, which I haven't played very much of yet. But again, it was a PS2 game. It's a PS2 game that I think it became multi-platform, though, at one point.
Yeah. I actually, I always think of it as a GameCube title because that's the only way I've ever owned it. And then I'm like, oh yeah, it's on other ones too.
And, like, it was one of those games that, again, like, I don't think I would play a lot of the classics that I missed if it weren't for Steam and other digital libraries. Because, or go back and play games that I know I liked. Like, I just recently rebought, probably for the third time, Sonic CD, this time on the PC, because it's my favorite Sonic the Hedgehog game. And I will play it anywhere I can. If they ever release Sonic CD digitally on the Switch, that's a game that I will continue to buy over and over again because it's my favorite Sonic game.
And that is your prerogative.
Right. But the thing is that freedom to be able to buy these games that you may never have ever played otherwise is really great. Like it happened with as recent as Shadows of Mordor. Um, I never played it when it came out. I heard great things. It was,
Yeah.
a friend of mine had been playing it on the PS4. When I saw it on sale, I bought it on Steam and then I played it. I still haven't finished it yet, but I saw what the hype was about. I really enjoyed it. And I like having that freedom of, sitting at your computer or on your Switch and going, credit card, purchase, great, I've got it. Well, purchase, credit card,
Download.
download, wait, 10 to 30 minutes depending on your connection, then play it. It's freeing, whereas, in the good old days, we'd have to decide we wanted something, go to the store, buy it, bring it home. And also, I feel like buyer's remorse, for better or worse, is less of a thing. If you buy a game that was a physical cartridge that you got home and hated, I mean, that was the end of the world. You spent all of your savings that you've been saving for weeks. You go to the store, you buy this game that you're super hyped for, you play it for 10 minutes and you hate it. And then you go back to an old game. You're like, son of a. Whereas on a digital library, if I bought a game for $10 on Steam and I play it and I'm like, it's only okay. I'm not really that upset at all because it's not that huge of an inconvenience. And you didn't have that freedom when you were dealing with physical media.
It does make the price point or the value a little more nebulous,
Yes.
rather than having this set point. I mean, on the other hand, I'm thinking of some personal experiences that for physical copies were games where I never would have found them or known about them if it weren't for the fact of brick and mortar.
Right.
And one incident, or a series of incidents, is when I was in the 5th grade, was when the Tamagotchi was popular. And when it first was, I know they've re-released it, whatever else, but now it's a superfluous thing. But when it first came out and everybody was losing their minds over it, I didn't want a Tamagotchi. There were Tamagotchis, there were Nanopets, there were Gigapets. And Gigapet had a Jurassic Park T-Rex. I was a 10-year-old boy. How could I not want this?
Right, of course.
Not to imply that, you're weird if you don't, but I still love I am a 31-year-old man with very strong opinions about dinosaurs.
You're not alone.
So, yeah, right. And so it's like, all right, I want this Tamagotchi, or I want this Gigapet. So my mother would be like, all right, fine, we'll go to Toys R Us, we'll see if it's there. I know these things usually sold out. So my brother and I would go with my mother. We'd go, they were out of them. So we're already there. So we'd look at the video game selection. And my brother and I would then find whatever PS1 game was $4.99 and seemed really interesting to us. And this happened 3 times. And so we ended up with some interesting games that I don't know if I'd have ever played them otherwise. And what were the games? There was Machine Head, which really was kind of an abysmal first-person shooter, fly-around kind of game. Very interesting to look at if you want to see good, bad cinematics and voice acting. Machine Hunter, which was kind of a top-down shooter game where there were certain kinds of machines that you could disable and take over. So you basically, anytime you're running around as a human was very dangerous, and you would just take over more and more powerful robots. It was kind of cool. And then Grid Runner, which was a basically sci-fi capture the flag with magic.
Huh.
Which is way, way more fun than it sounds. And it was a 2-player game. And so those were games that I would not know have existed probably even today if I hadn't gone to Toys R Us to get a T-Rex Gigapet and been denied, and just went, well, let me get something for $5. And when I rebuilt my collection, I bought Grid Runner because I like it. So,
yeah, I think that's another thing. We haven't really tackled gaming media a lot. We talk about it a little, but I think that's a thing that has lowered in value, mostly because I don't go to those stores anymore. But, back when I worked at a GameStop years and years ago, a long time ago, maybe
yeah.
over 10 years ago. Jeez. Anyway, you know, the vendor, the retail salesman, their opinions mattered a lot to a lot of gamers, you know, or
Yeah.
any industry. You know, you're going to buy hardware, you know, or tools, or
You go to buy clothing. You go to buy
AV equipment. Like, you know, you trust musical instruments. You trust the vendor. And like, I used to chat with gamers all the time for long periods of time about games that I would recommend and this and that. And you know, even when I was a shopper, I would do the same. But now that everything's digital, and that, you know, or if you're going into the store, like as a grown ass man now, I have no time to shop at a store. Like, I just don't have the patience for it. I'll browse every once in a while, but for the most part, if I'm walking into a game store, it's because I know exactly what I want. I want to get the hell out. Because as you get older, you get more cynical and hate people more. Sorry, kids. But that's just how it goes usually.
I actually really enjoy perusing. I will take half an hour and I'll like look over everything. But
Fair. That curmudgeon-y view is just mine, but I've also not ever really been a huge browsing person. I like to pre-shop before I shop. But that said, because I'm like that now, I don't really chat with the people behind the counter anymore. And it's a bummer because I feel like I would get exposed to a lot more stuff if I did. And, you know, of course, with that, there was the other side of the evolution, whereas now there's blogs and videos and YouTube, and you can look up stuff on games all over the internet, you know, without getting the opinion of the real retailer. But it is a bit of a bummer that they've kind of lost a little bit of power, especially with adult gamers. Like, people they could probably have the best conversation with will less likely be browsing in a store.
Oh, yeah. And I think also I've had some really good retail shopping experiences. I mean, some terrible ones as well. But,
Sure.
you know, we live in New York City, so there are plenty of not only, you know, GameStops, there's also independent game stores. And, I mean, in particular, no, I'll shout them out again. I live in, like, way upper Manhattan, like, way more uptown than most non-New Yorkers realize exists. And there's a GameStop up there where, again, like from my first visit there, I don't go there a lot, but I've been there a couple of times. Staff's good, manager's really nice. And this isn't just because he's mentioned he's listened to a couple of the episodes, but I do. No, it's true. No, it is awesome. Honestly true. No, and it's been and they're one of the GameStops that actually carries like a couple of retro titles, and it's always it's nice to go in there. And in my hometown in New Jersey, there is a independent game store called Level 1 Games that, again, people there are really enthusiastic. They know what they're talking about. And anytime I go there, it's a really good conversation just about what you've been playing, what's been going on, and everything else. And so, yeah, you're right. It is it's a very wonderful, valuable thing to be able to have that experience. And kind of as the borderlines have blurred and the water's been muddied, it's a little harder to find that. And certainly with a lot of video game stores themselves being sort of the independent ones falling apart and the chain stores sort of all being absorbed into the GameStop brand, it's hard not to just see it as all interchangeable cogs. And I know there's been a lot said online as well about how corporate GameStop treats its employees.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, without getting into the politics of that, you know, I think part of it also, though, on the upswing has made me value my gamer friends' opinions more. I mean, I always did, but because of social media, like Scoop Joey, who's a listener, and his wonderful wife, Scoop Jessica, who are fans of Madam Mattingly's Ice Cream Social, which is another podcast that I listen to, and I met them through, who are avid participants with us on the internet. Scoop Joey recently mentioned Golf Story, which is a huge hit on the Switch that I've been hearing about for a while. And he's like, if you're an RPG fan, you have to play this game, end of story. And I was like, is it really that good? He's like, it's some of the funniest writing he's ever experienced in a game. Like, he laughs out loud all the time. And it's an RPG about playing golf. I mean, the concept is just ridiculous to begin with. But like... Now I really want to get it. I mean, it was on his and his wife's recommendation that I downloaded Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which I've started playing. And so now I really want to play this indie title as well because it's gotten such high praise, not just from him, but from others. But again, I trust the word of mouth of a gamer that I identify with now more than ever before. And also back in the analog days, like it was so much harder to communicate. Like you had your small circle of friends where you lived, but that was it. You know, there were no community forums. There were no, ways to really interact with people who weren't local. And so it's much nicer to be able to do that in the digital era. And also, like, something to plug Groovy, who might as well be a sponsor at this point. The cool thing about Groovy is that you can just browse and comment on complete strangers' reviews and say you agree, you disagree, and have general discourse that, at least for the moment, hasn't been poisoned by the terrible parts of the internet. And that's so great. Like, I had a discussion with someone, and I think I've mentioned this before, about Shovel Knight and how I actually thought the Plague Knight campaign was better than the original Shovel Knight campaign. And he's like, oh, I didn't really get into it. And I explained why I thought it was better. And he's like, oh, maybe I should give it another shot. That's awesome gaming discourse. Convincing someone to go back and try something that he originally didn't like is fantastic. And it's fun to kind of have that kind of discourse.
Oh, yeah. No, and yeah, the earlier days of the internet, like those things existed, but they were a lot more shadowy or a lot more and not in like they were doing anything nefarious, but it was just like, where do I find things?
Right.
Like, yeah, I remember posting opinions about Castlevania on a website that was at the time the Castlevania Dungeon, and I think still exists. And I like the people who do that have gone on and done bigger and better things. So I'm just like, you had your circle, and occasionally somebody would find a new game, something would come in, and maybe everybody got it. Maybe you were just the weirdo. I definitely know games, certainly Final Fantasy games, Dance Dance Revolution, EverQuest, stuff like that was things that like cracked into my my circle of friends, my group of friends, the gamers and everything. Like one of us would get it, and it's just like eventually we all just got it. But it's like those would happen few and far between.
Sure.
But
well, and also back in the analog days, you wouldn't really get to play a new game unless you bought it or went to a friend's house and played it. I mean, my love for RPGs probably wouldn't be what they are if I hadn't gone to my friend Roy's house to play Chrono Trigger, which I immediately got obsessed with and is now my favorite RPG of all time. Or my friend Matt Karen, who I mentioned before, who I grew up with. When Final Fantasy VII came out, I didn't really know what an RPG was. I knew I liked Chrono Trigger. I knew I liked Super Mario RPG, but like, I didn't know what Final Fantasy really was. I got into Final Fantasy really late and then went back. So I watched him play this beautiful game, and like I would sit with him for hours. And he was not someone who liked watching other people play, but I never minded, which is why I'm kind of into less plays as an finger quotes adult.
Same.
But like I was just fascinated by this game and the materia and these characters. And of course, it was also the first fairly mature RPG at that time. There had been others, but that was definitely the most popular.
It was easier to show those mature themes.
Right. And so I was fascinated by it. And then, of course, I finally got my own PlayStation. I bought that game and dove into it. And I think if I hadn't had that experience of sharing it with my friend because it was analog and I couldn't just download it when I got home, I don't know that I would have such strong feelings. The only reason I think I like the Resident Evil franchise rather, and that Resident Evil 2 is still my favorite Resident Evil, is because I spent days, and by days I mean nights, sitting with my friend Matt playing that game. And by playing, I meant he played and I cowered behind him, and every time like the
door opened
or someone burst through a wall, we'd both jump. It's why I like watching let's plays of horror games online, because I like the camaraderie of being scared with someone. I can't play horror games on my own because I am a coward, but playing with a friend, like we both jump, we both get scared, we both laugh, like, and that's something that the digital medium and online gaming kind of has taken away a little bit, and which is a bummer, because there's less reason when everyone can have their own system and everyone can have their own copy of the game to get together and sit and play and take turns or whatever else.
Oh yeah, I mean, speaking of Chrono Trigger, when I was younger, I would remember, like, I mean, there was certainly games that you would pass around and games that would be borrowed, and amongst my friends, there was one copy of Chrono Trigger, and it originally belonged to my friend Kieran, and it sort of like would end up at people's homes for months on end, and it would be like, wait, you still have my copy? Yeah, I'm still playing it, and it would get passed around, and like games like that would happen, or yeah, like building anticipation. I remember um one of the PS1 games that I was the most hyped for that I don't think anyone else ever was like nearly as hyped was Mega Man X4 because because it had come out and I would play it at my friend Johnny's house and he had the Sega Saturn version because he really liked the Sega Saturn, thought it was the better system. Um, it was the less successful, better is, for the ages. And I remember playing it and loving it. And it's like, this is the best game. And that was like summer of that year. And I had to wait till Christmas before getting it as a Christmas gift.
Hmm.
And it was just like the amount of time that this game existed. I would go to his house and play it, but I couldn't borrow it because I couldn't play it in my own home.
Right.
It was just like, oh my God, the roller coaster ride of emotion that was. And yeah, you're right. Like that is something that digital games have taken away. You can't really lend. You can't really share in that same way. It's not as simple as like, you know, last year when I went, "Oh, Matt, here's my copy of Shovel Knight. Play it."
Yeah. And I fell in love with it and then bought it myself. Yeah, no, that kind of has disappeared. I mean, I don't know if it was the 360 or the Xbox One, but I know that there are family share plans for the Xbox systems where if multiple users are on the same family plan, you can lend digital games to each other.
Yeah.
And then I think Steam also has something like that with a family plan where you can like sort of lend games or something. But yeah, it's not quite the same. Like I think it'd be really cool if I had a digital copy of, say, Sonic Mania on my Switch and I could lend it to you through the system by you having like, and you have it for 30 days. You can play the full game for 30 days because I lent it to you and then it bounces back, but your cloud save stays. And if I want to lend it to you again, I can. And
Yeah.
whether I have access to it or not could be whatever. But I think it would just be a kind of a cool system to lend people games.
Yeah. They would probably have to put something in effect where as long as it was lent to somebody else, you couldn't also play it.
Right, because they're getting your full version for that time.
Yeah. And I can see why, from a business standpoint, this notion of like being able to lend games back and forth would be frowned upon or is a little different. I mean, I remember Nintendo not liking Blockbuster Video as far as rentals go. Probably their stance has changed. I don't know. But
I mean, it doesn't matter because Blockbuster's gone, so there's that.
Yes, their opinions on Blockbuster are immaterial. But I mean, just on game rentals in general,
Right.
it's kind of a strange thing. And
Is GameFly still a thing? Because I don't use it anymore.
I'm not sure. I'm looking that up right now. Hold on.
Because I remember when GameFly first came out, I was so excited to have a Netflix version of video game rental. But my love for it was short-lived. So those who didn't use GameFly was like physical Netflix rentals, but for gaming. But the thing was,
it still exists.
It still exists. You have and I don't know if this is still the same, but you had a list of like 10 games you wanted to rent. But since they had a limited physical warehouse, you got the first game on your list that was available towards the top of your list. So you might not get number 1 or 2 or 3, you'd get 4. And I hated that because I always wanted the top game. I never really wanted anything else. And if you only had one game on your list, you would be waiting longer to get it because if it wasn't available. And so I eventually dropped it.
Oh my God, you could rent classic games. Well, I mean, when I say classic, they don't go further back than PS2 era.
But
you can
still.
get PS2, Xbox, GameCube. You can rent Wii, DS, Game Boy Advance, and PSP games.
I apologize, Sarah, if you're listening, Jeff's wife, Sarah, to be specific, because if he starts sinking money into this, it's probably my fault.
I'm probably not going to. If I'm, it's all well and good to rent the games, and that's a very cool thing. But in our earlier talk this episode about like physical space,
Yeah.
I am digging in on collecting physical copies of games and like going full hipster minimalist on other things.
Fair
like,
enough.
I will have a digital comic book collection. I will have digital books, and my wife Sarah and I have slowly built up this very nice happy medium of we both have Kindles and we both really like having digital books to read because that's way easier to carry around.
Yep.
And you can just leave that book open. So it is a very easy, like, oh, I'm just not, no other books, so I'm done with this one. And then having physical paperbacks and things so that we can lend them amongst our friends, which
Right.
nowadays is the thing that, there is one copy of the King Killer Chronicles books amongst my friends. And they just get passed around in the slowest book club ever. Um, or the Locke Lamora books, the Gentleman Bastard series, things like that. So I'm minimizing those physical things. Even like getting any kitchen gadget I have that has only one use, I'm getting rid of it. So this way I can have more physical games.
Sure.
And I enjoy artifacts of the physical game. I mean, there is often talk of, old, certainly PC games, feelies, things that would come with the game that were either just a really nice instruction manual or things beyond that, like pieces of the game world actualized in a way. And a lot of older PC games did that as copy protection. You'd have to enter in something based off of an item you got in there, or on the console end of things, one of the most infamous was Star Tropics for the NES. Came with a physical letter from, your uncle that's disappeared in the game. And you have to dip the letter in water in order to see a password in it. Fortunately,
That's cool.
that password is not randomized from game to game, so it's always the same.
Yeah.
And that's very easy to look up. And even when they did the Virtual Console re-release of Star Tropics, they then put an in-game letter dipping thing so you could see it, so they could keep that going. I remember when I would get PC games that, had the big box and had like a big instruction manual and all kinds of crazy things, I would read through those instruction manuals like you would not believe.
Oh, we could do a whole
Um,
separate episode on instruction manuals. Like, I was that asshole who wouldn't let my friends play the new game I bought until I read the instruction manual from cover to cover.
oh my God. I
That
I
that
still
was
have
literally me.
I still have my Crystalis instruction manual. I know I've mentioned
Nice.
that before. And when I was a kid and couldn't beat the game, I would look at the items in there and just get so excited. And
Yeah.
Another one of those building of anticipation sort of
Sure.
things. And yeah, and I mean, yes, you can get digital instruction manuals, you can get all sorts of other stuff, but again, when it's all on your phone or when it's all on an easily accessible device, the need for it, the chance for anticipation is diminished. Doesn't go away. It's for some people it's perfect, but it's diminished. And it's very funny to look at all of this, I think.
I think so too. I think it's safe to say that me and Jeff share a similar opinion that, we like digital, but we have a nostalgia and a preference for physical. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think listening. Let us know what your preference is. Do you hate clutter and prefer digital library because then you don't have crap everywhere, which is totally valid? Or do you only prefer physical and hate digital because it feels like less of an experience? Or are you
Do
in
you
between?
actually own the PSP Go? Do you own it? Did you like it when it came out? Be honest.
And those kinds of things. So yeah, let us know what you think. Or are you in between, like the two of us are, where we're more favorable towards digital now, but we still prefer some things about the physical versions.
How do you prefer it in your life?
Exactly. As always, thank you so much for listening. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, though that page has been a little quiet lately. We're, of course, on Libsyn is the main hosting for our podcast. If you're a first-time listener, we're available on Google Play, iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, and probably anywhere else. Please, if you're a fan of the podcast, write us a review on iTunes. It helps to get us featured, 5 stars, and just say a little something that people can read up on. We'd really appreciate it, and share it around with your friends. We appreciate all feedback. We appreciate, when you guys reach out and interact with us online. And also, as I've said before, if you send us an email or you send us enough fan mail, listener mail, I hate the word fan. It just, ugh. Sorry. Listener
Interaction.
Exactly. If you send us some more listener interaction, we'll do a listener episode. We'd love, we don't really do game reviews, but if there's a specific game that you guys really want us to talk about, send us an email or post on our Facebook page. We'll happily take it on. We're always looking for new topics and new stuff to talk about.
Yes, please. Even if it's like a game series. I know there's a couple off the top of my head that it's just like we could probably devote entire episodes to them.
Yeah, we did it with Star Wars, and I'm thinking there are other anthologies. Like, I feel like we're revving up eventually for a Mario or a Zelda episode at some point.
Absolutely. And, if you let us know that you want that, that'll certainly happen a lot faster. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Once again, I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.